Try not to embarrass us today. Those were the first words I heard as I stepped out of the car and into another family gathering I never truly belonged to. My mother said it softly, smiling at the guests already arriving, but the weight behind her tone was sharp enough to cut deeper than any insult spoken loudly. Inside the grand house, laughter echoed everywhere. My cousins stood in perfect groups, law students, engineers, business graduates, future doctors, each one introduced like a trophy, polished to perfection. And then there was me, no degree that impressed them, no title that made them nod proudly, no achievements they felt were worth mentioning. Just me, she's still figuring things out, and my father would say whenever someone asked about me, that phrase, still figuring things out, had become my identity. It meant I was behind, it meant I was less. It meant I was the family's polite disappointment wrapped in silence. I overheard it again that afternoon. She's the least successful one in the family. My aunt whispered to another relative, thinking I was far enough to not hear. But I did, I always did, and no one corrected her. No one ever did. I smiled anyway. That was my role. Smile, nod, stay quiet. Don't disturb the illusion of their perfect family tree. My cousins talked about internships abroad, salary packages, promotions. Every sentence was another reminder of where I wasn't. I sat near the edge of the room, holding a glass of juice that tasted like nothing. My presence felt like a mistake no one wanted to fix, but everyone had learned to ignore. But what they didn't know was that I had tried. I had tried harder than anyone knew. Late nights studying alone while they went to parties. Applications sent and rejected without explanation. Interviews where I was told I lacked confidence, though no one asked how many years I had spent being told I was not enough. At some point, I stopped arguing with reality. I simply accepted the label they gave me, the unsuccessful one. Still, deep inside, something refused to die. That something had led me to make a choice no one in my family understood. While they were busy ranking success by salary and social status, I had quietly stepped into a completely different world, a world of discipline, silence, and steel. A world where no one cared about my family name or my cousin's achievements. A world where only endurance mattered. I remembered the day I first told them, I want to apply for the academy. I had said during dinner once, my voice steady even though my hands shook under the table. There was a pause, then laughter. My uncle chuckled, you, in that field. My brother didn't even look up from his phone. You won't last a week. My mother sighed like I had disappointed her in advance. Don't chase things that are not meant for you. That sentence followed me longer than any physical pain ever could. Still I applied. Still I left. And when I did, no one stopped me. Not because they supported me, but because they didn't believe I would make it far enough to matter. The day I packed my bag, my father didn't even look up from his newspaper. If you fail, he said flatly, don't come back expecting sympathy. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I had already stopped expecting sympathy a long time ago. Now, standing at that gathering months later, I felt like a ghost in my own family. Present but invisible, breathing but unacknowledged, yet something inside me was no longer the same girl who used to flinch at their words. I had learned how to stand in silence without breaking, how to be underestimated without collapsing under it, how to turn pain into discipline, and somewhere deep inside, beyond the humiliation and whispers, I knew something had changed. They still saw me as the least successful one, but they had no idea what I had become while they weren't looking. The day I left, there was no farewell gathering, no emotional goodbye, no tears at the door, just a suitcase, a quiet morning, and a house that already felt like it had forgotten me before I even stepped out. My mother was in the kitchen, carefully arranging breakfast plates, like nothing important was happening. My father sat in the living room, reading the newspaper as if the world outside mattered more than the daughter walking away from his home. "You're really going through with this?" my mother asked without looking up. "Yes," I said, a pause. Then a sigh. "Fine, just don't come back halfway." That was it. No hug, no encouragement, no fear of losing me. It should have hurt more than it did, but I had already trained my heart to expect less from them. At the gate, my brother finally spoke, still scrolling on his phone. "You'll be back in a month." I didn't answer, because I didn't want to argue with people who had already decided my ending. When I stepped into the transport that took me away, I didn't look back. Not because I was strong yet, but because I was afraid that if I did, I might lose the courage to leave. The first weeks were nothing like home. There was no comfort, no silence to hide in, no soft place to fall. Everything was strict, sharp, and immediate. Orders replaced conversations, discipline replaced emotions, exhaustion replaced thoughts. I was no longer the least successful one. I was just a name on a list. Waking up before sunrise became routine. Running until my lungs burned became normal. Learning to stand still while my entire body screamed became survival. Some nights, I lay on a thin bed and wondered if they were right. If I truly didn't belong here either. If I was just chasing another place where I would fail more quietly. But every time doubt rose, something inside me pushed back harder. Not pride, not anger, something quieter, refusal. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. And slowly, something began to change. My body hardened not just in strength, but in endurance. My voice became steadier. My movements became precise. My hesitation disappeared little by little, replaced by instinct. I stopped waiting for approval. I stopped expecting praise. I stopped needing anyone to tell me I was enough. Because here, no one did. And strangely, that made me stronger. Letters from home came at first. Not many. Mostly practical. "How are you managing? Don't get yourself into trouble. We hope you are not wasting your time." But even those stopped eventually. At some point, silence replaced curiosity. Then silence turned into assumption. And assumption turned into dismissal. I overheard it once during a rare visit from someone who knew my family. "She's probably struggling," they said. "Maybe she already quit." My name became a rumor in my own home. A story people told without facts. A failure they no longer bothered to check on. But in my world, something else was happening. My instructors noticed, not loudly, not immediately, but steadily. I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the loudest. I wasn't the one who stood out in crowds, but I never stopped. When others broke, I kept going. When others complained, I adjusted. When others gave up, I stayed until I understood. That was what they began to see. Not talent, not luck, but persistence that didn't bend easily. One evening, after a long training exercise, I stood alone watching the sunset bleed across the horizon. My hands were bruised, my body exhausted, my mind empty in the best possible way. For the first time in years, I didn't hear their voices in my head. No least successful, no disappointment, no comparisons, just silence. And in that silence, I realized something important. They hadn't destroyed me. They had simply never bothered to understand me. And that misunderstanding had given me something dangerous, the space to become someone they would never recognize. It happened on an ordinary morning, one of those days where everything felt routine, precise, and predictable. We were assembled early, standing in formation under a pale sky that hadn't yet decided whether to fully wake up. The air was cold enough to sting the lungs, but no one moved, no one complained. We had learned that discomfort was not an excuse here, it was simply part of existence. I stood in my place, eyes forward, hands steady, body trained to obey without hesitation. That was when the atmosphere shifted. A convoy arrived, nothing dramatic at first, just the quiet authority of vehicles pulling in and stopping with purpose. But the moment everyone straightened a little more, I knew this wasn't a normal inspection. Whispers traveled through the ranks before silence crushed them again. "Colonels," I didn't turn my head. I didn't need to. Rank didn't change my duty, but something about the air felt heavier. A man stepped out, uniform crisp, presence sharp, eyes scanning everything like he wasn't just looking, he was measuring. Colonel Harris. He walked slowly along the formation, not rushing, not speaking, just observing. Every step carried authority that didn't need to be announced. When he stopped near my section, I felt nothing special at first. He wasn't looking at me, not yet. He was looking at everyone. Then he paused, longer than necessary. His gaze returned, this time on me. I kept my posture steady, but something inside tightened, not fear. Recognition felt like something I hadn't prepared for. He asked for my file. A nearby officer hesitated, then handed it over. The colonel flipped through it once, then again. The silence stretched, and then he said my name, not loudly, but clearly enough that every word carried. "Why is this candidate not highlighted?" No one answered immediately. He looked up. "Who trained this one?" An instructor stepped forward. "Sir," she progressed steadily. No issues, just quiet. The colonel's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus. "Quiet doesn't mean ordinary," he said. That sentence landed harder than any command I had ever heard. He turned back to the file, then at me again, and something shifted in his expression, not surprise. Not doubt, recognition, the kind that comes when someone sees a pattern others missed completely. He asked for a demonstration. Right there, no preparation, no warning, just execution. What followed felt like stepping out of my body. Commands were given, tasks were set, pressure was immediate. I moved, not thinking, just responding. Every drill, every sequence, every decision flowed like something already written inside me long before I arrived here. I didn't look for approval. I didn't search for faces in the crowd. I just did what I had been trained to do cleanly, precisely, without hesitation. When it ended, the silence was different. He didn't speak for several seconds, then he nodded once. Slowly, as if confirming something to himself, "I want this one reassigned," he said finally. A ripple went through the officers. But no one questioned him, because when a colonel speaks like that, it is not opinion, it is decision. After the exercise, as we were dismissed, I caught fragments of conversation. Who is she? No one special. Then why did he notice her? I kept walking. Because I had learned something important long before this moment. Recognition from others is temporary, but discipline stays with you even when no one is watching. Later that day, I was called again, this time alone. The colonel stood near a desk covered in reports. He didn't waste time. "You were invisible on paper," he said. I stayed silent. He continued, but not in execution. A pause. Then the words that stayed with me longer than anything my family had ever said. "People like you are often underestimated until it becomes dangerous to keep doing so." He closed the file, looked at me directly. "Tell me," he said, "who did you think you were before this?" For a moment, I almost answered honestly. The least successful one, the disappointment, the one they never believed in. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said nothing, because for the first time I wasn't trying to explain myself anymore. And somehow, in that silence, I realized something quietly powerful. I was no longer waiting to be seen. I had already started being noticed. The first time my family heard my name again, it wasn't through me. It was through someone they trusted more than rumors, someone official. someone whose words carried weight, someone they could not dismiss. A letter arrived first, then another, then a visit that changed everything. At home, life had continued exactly the way it always did. Family gatherings filled with polished conversations, achievements displayed like trophies, and my absence treated like a quiet correction. To their perfect image, I had become a memory they used less and less. She probably left that program. My aunt would say whenever my name came up, "I told you it wasn't for her." My mother would respond with a small, tired smile. At least she tried. That sentence had become my entire existence in their world. At least she tried. Not that she succeeded. Not that she endured. Not that she built anything. Just she tried. And then the day came when that illusion broke. It started with a car pulling into the driveway, unfamiliar, official, and too quiet to be ordinary. Everyone noticed. No one understood why they were suddenly nervous. And then he stepped out, uniform. Authority, presence that immediately silenced the air around him. Colonel Harris, he wasn't there by accident. He asked for my family by name. That alone changed the atmosphere. My father stepped forward first, confused but trying to maintain dignity. "Yes, we are her family." The colonel nodded once. "I am here regarding your daughter." A pause. That word daughter sounded unfamiliar in their house when attached to me. My mother's expression tightened slightly. "Is there a problem?" The colonel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a folder and spoke words that shattered years of assumptions in a single sentence. "Your daughter is one of the most disciplined and hyper-forming individuals in her category." Silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that exposes everything hidden underneath. My father blinked. That must be a mistake. The colonel looked up slowly. "There is no mistake in records or results." Another pause. Then, more firmly, "She has been recommended for higher responsibility due to exceptional performance." No one spoke, because no one knew how. My mother's hands trembled slightly, but she was always average. She struggled. The colonel closed the file. "Struggle and failure are not the same thing," he said. That sentence landed harder than anything I had ever heard in that house. Days later, I returned not as the girl they once dismissed, but in uniform that carried weight they could finally recognize. The moment I stepped inside, the house felt smaller. Not physically, emotionally. Like the walls themselves didn't know how to hold this version of me. My cousins stared first, then stopped talking, then stared again. Whispers started, but they didn't sound confident anymore. She's actually in uniform." My brother looked confused, almost offended. "What is this supposed to mean?" I didn't answer immediately. Because I didn't come back to explain myself. I came back because I no longer needed permission to exist in their world. My father finally spoke, voice lower than usual. "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at him calmly, and for the first time, I didn't feel small in front of him. "I did," I said softly. A pause. He didn't respond, because he remembered. All the times I tried to speak. All the times they laughed. All the times they dismissed me before I even began. The colonel stood beside me that day, not as decoration, but as confirmation. Not of who I was becoming, but of who I had already become without their belief. He spoke briefly to the family before leaving. "She did not become successful because someone believed in her," he said. "She became successful because she continued when no one did." And then he left, leaving behind a silence that felt different from all the others. This one wasn't empty. It was heavy with realization. That evening, I stood near the same gate where I once left unnoticed. But this time, no one ignored me. Still, I didn't feel the need for their reactions anymore. No pride, no anger, no satisfaction in their shock. Just stillness, because revenge, I realized, wasn't loud. It wasn't confrontation. It wasn't proving anything in front of those who doubted you. It was becoming someone they could no longer define. Inside the house, I heard them talking about me differently now. Carefully, respectfully, almost unsure, but I didn't step back inside to listen. I had already heard everything I needed. Not their approval, not their apology, but the final truth. I was never the least successful one. I was simply the one they understood too late.